a talk after so long. I'm Rilke Oakley, I'm the curator here, and I've worked with Claire and Sean putting this show together. I'd first just like to acknowledge that today we're on the land of the Darug and Gundungurra, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, as well as any Aboriginal people who are here today. And just before, I'm not going to talk very long, I'm going to hand over to Claire and Sean in a minute. I won't read out a CV or anything, I just wanted to say a little bit about how it has been working with them, putting this show together over the 2 years of COVID. So as the Cultural Centre programs solo shows into our exhibition program, and we've had a number of Blue Mountains artists over the nearly 9 years. I've been working with these guys, really building this show over the last couple of years with all these changes. So every step of the way we had things that had to shift this way or that way, or we couldn't get freight, these guys couldn't go on residencies where they were going to make new work. So what work were we going to put in the show? And every single time, what really impressed me about the way you guys work is that you were able to flexibly blend to the next solution and find a solution for making the show happen with amazing, amazing work. And the other thing that I particularly have felt working with Claire and Sean, but really this week as it's come into being, is the physicality of the work you do. So as people working with objects, there's no boundaries. You have these massive objects and the concepts that you bring together, you go, hey, yeah, well, why don't we just cut up a car, wrap it up, and hang it on the wall? and some of these works are nearly 10 years old. It's a practice that you've been building for over the 20 years you've been working together. So they're not new ideas, and you've really refined the way you deal with objects, which I had to talk to the Arts Hub writer the other day, and she said, what's it been like working with you guys? I said, well, it's better than a university education, actually working directly with the artists rather than reading about what you've done or even coming to the exhibition. Working directly with you, I've learned how your practices come together. Anyway, that's really all I wanted to say. We are going to kind of move around the gallery, and we're going to start with the student work. So I'll just quickly introduce that before I hand over. Part of this exhibition was to engage with the local high schools, and we had a series of workshops. Some of those were interrupted by COVID, so it was a little less comprehensive than intended. There are two works that involved local students, and Claire and Sean ran workshops doing this Lego piece, and then also sent home dead smartphones, which they'd primed, and the students painted landscapes onto those. So we'll start with that, if you guys want to talk about that a little bit, and then people can ask questions, jump in whenever you like. It's just going to be a bit of a conversation around the gallery.
So I think, broadly, you could say our practice is quite intuitive, and the ideas and concepts that we're interested in, we really like to explore through materiality and through engaging with materials. Through that, I think we come to a greater understanding of the issues that we're thinking about. But anyway, it'd be nice to look at this work here to kick it off. We were really lucky to have a couple of computer wizards help us out with this work in the beginning. We've got two guys at the back, Evan.
And Louis Artoli was really the mastermind behind getting this, the mathematics of the colours that we require for this Lego work, which is always a conundrum for us because we have to buy each brick by brick for these works, and with the help, it's really hard to work out how many oranges you need and Louis was really good.
No, it was really funny because like, so usually, you know, because our practice can be quite meditative and like there's, you can see like there's a lot of kind of process involved, and often, you know, just the whole process of just counting something can be even part of the work. So we said, oh, okay, why don't we just get like the high school students to just like count how many bricks we need. You know, there's like 80 high school students. Between the lot of them, they can just like kick it over like in half an hour. And then like the teachers brought it to the kids and they're like, no, I'm not doing that. Can't you get a herb for that?
Yeah, majority of the high school students, except Louis, we're not too happy.
No, but everybody always says, oh, can't you get an app for that? And it's like, well, why don't you make the app? Well, someone else can make the app. Well, I'll just like,
So we just thought, well, this is fair enough. It's a collaboration. We should start from this point, you know, like, help us with the maths. We're not good with that bit.
Yeah. So but it was really funny. So it was kind of like, so Louis was like moving away at home, but then at the same time also people from the cultural centre were like, also had like pieces of paper and were like just doing it old school, like counting it up. So people that work for the culture centre and also the volunteers. So it was like, it's kind of like a really funny generational thing, like coming at it in two very different perspectives and like seeing where it landed up. Anyway, so basically the way that this came about was like each student had like an A4 piece of paper that had like the map of what the image was, and then they kind of rendered it using the Lego that we gave them during the workshops. And then once all that was all done, we put it together, and then we got the image together. And so you can see that, I don't know whether it's easy or whether the image is quite abstract, but the image, it also links in with these tapestry works that we had made previously that depict fossil fuel disasters. So each image is image of like some kind of explosion or some kind of like situation, whether it be like a car bomb or napalm or even the 9/11 attacks. That's something that includes the use of fossil fuel within it. And we're really interested in the idea of a kind of a bookending of time, because as most of you probably know, like fossil fuel comes from the Devonian age, and that's like 400 million years ago. So 400 million years ago, there were plants and animals that basically captured the carbon that was within the atmosphere, and then that over a period of time, that kind of became sediment and stuff like that. And now we're able to exploit that resource. So it's this really weird thing where it's this kind of flash, where something takes 400 million years to create, and then like we've just burnt it in like one generation, and then that is kind of bookended with this idea, like with the cross stitches, it's like a photograph, which is an instant, and then like to render that takes so much time. It takes like.
Well, in cross stitching anyway.
But also within like.
Well, with the Lego as well. Yeah, it becomes like a meditation in itself, and the time and the meditation of that is then, also part of the concept of the work. But not only that, we also worked on these mobile phones here. It's called the Dead Smartphone Project, and so we worked with 5 schools across the Blue Mountains.
Does everybody want to come in and check out like the details?
So the idea was that everyone could use, each student was given a phone, and they could use a phone as their canvas to depict a local landscape. Well, the whole show is called Epicomic Growth, which you probably know means it's that little shoot, the regrowth of usually trees that have, been on fire. I mean, we've been dealing with explosions and fire due to fossil fuels.
I think this work wasn't so. I guess the idea of this work came before the fires of 2020. 2020. But I think the Mayday work that's around the corner, I think that's much more directly linked to our response to the fires. Yeah. But I mean, I
guess the idea of epicomic growth, though, we could talk about, like in destruction, there is also renewal, which is something that we always lean back to within our work. The cycle of even iron ore, it is mined from the earth, it is sent to China, it is made into a car. The cars end up in the desert just as a relic that's then returned to the earth in some weird fashion. And so I guess with economic growth, we're thinking about these teenagers that are working on, something that is about destruction. And also the idea of the Lego brick too. The Lego brick is something that is always about building and then destructing. This renewal and the idea of aspiration as well in building. So Part Beyond, we began in 2011. We had a gallery in San Francisco representing us, and we decided to buy an aeroplane and then post it through the postal service from Roma in Queensland to San Francisco. So in order to do that, of course we have to cut it up, but we've also used the fabric of the plane in a sense as the package itself. So it becomes like a portmanteau. And I mean the dead aeroplane, which we didn't send the engine, but this aeroplane was sent via another system. So when you think about an aeroplane of this scale, it's usually about the individual being able to have this freedom. But as soon as it's sent through the postal service, it's reliant on a system that has been put in place by that society. So it's a different means of transportation, I guess, but it's still, it harks back to that idea of Part Beyond, which is about, in French, sending something by air. So it's had a bit of a journey, and you can see the destinations it has made on the surface of the plane.
I think a lot of our work thinks about the individual within larger society and what it means to be part of a collective, or what it means to be part of a society that collaborates or works together. So it's a very strange period of time where, on one hand, the idea of the individual is there's the idea of like the most important thing in the world is the individual, but at the same time we live in such a complex society that really demands the cooperation of like many people. So there's a real kind of tension between that, in that it would be impossible to just live by yourself on your own, but at the same time people don't understand that everybody's in it together. So we think a lot about these kind of systems and how, as individuals, we kind of slot into these systems. So one kind of touchstone for us is Luigi Barzini's story, Peking to Paris, where it was the first motor race where they drove from Peking in China to, or Beijing, I guess it's called now, and to Paris. And that idea of the lone kind of traveller, the lone kind of person inside this machine, similar to Jack Kerouac's On the Road, or other kind of these kind of man and machine situations. And I think this work really tries to kind of map that within a wider structure. Like, what do we have to do to become part of this structure? If we want to go and fly a plane from Roma in Queensland to LA, what happens to that object, and how does that manifest in terms of the way the object looks? So in a sense, the object becomes like a postcard, and the way a postcard is not only an object, but it also maps the space that it's got. And as Claire was saying, it's kind of like an old steamer trunk, in a sense. When people used to travel by boat, you can remember those kind of big trunks and then all the paraphernalia on it. So the object describes its own, it's been transformed to fit into a system, but then it's also describes like the journey that it's taken to.
Oh, I was just going to ask, are you going to post some more pieces and continue the
Originally,
interaction?
the project was an open project, in that we thought that we would, through showing it in different spaces, it would also be reflected within, we would put
That
through
was
the
the intention.
postal system, and then but then the postal system's actually changed since then.
So the last time it was posted was 2013, and that was posted from Queensland back to, well, it's in the collection of Museum of Contemporary Art. And we were hoping that it would get posted from there to here, and there was so many issues. It was, you know, in that time from 2013 to now, there's been so many systematic issues that wasn't going to make this possible post within the post, because everything is now automated, not handled by, you know, the human, which really is a lot about, you know, how we work anyway. It's a concern that we've often thought about.
So yeah, we were talking a lot about, can we still slot into this system? Can we make changes and stuff like that? But in the end, it kind of just stretched too far, and then we thought, we'll just put a line underneath it, and it's the project is kind of finished.
So the project is complete. It was a project that lasted 4 years. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question just again about systems? So this piece is in the collection of the MCA.
That's right.
So how do they usually store it, and what does that sort of?
I've
do you know
not
what that
been to
looks
their
like?
storage. I mean, they're really, it's interesting just dealing with the conservators there.
Yes.
Because they have, you know, sent images and just said, how do you feel about this bit of gaffer tape falling off the side, and some of the newspapers falling out, and, you know, this bit, the metal's bent, and also just like, you know, often anything that's within a museum collection is treated with, you know, it's a precious historical object in a sense, and
It's also interesting too that it's both an object, but then also the way museological practice is these days. It's also as if they were kind of custodians too, in that like a lot of artworks are not just objects, but they are kind of a set of ideas, and they have to kind of continue that on, and how does that fit into the artist's intention and all these kind of things. So I mean, it's also interesting coming from an artist treats their work in a different way that a museum treats artwork. So yeah.
The MCA have a large storage unit off-site, and they do have a lot of room. This as the artist was saying, was going to arrive as is through the mail. So in the negotiations about that, it didn't get wrapped and packed in beautiful crates. It arrived in, they're sort of like travelling crates that you can put different things in. The top's open, they're on wheels. So they just packed them in those with International Art Services, and they arrived like that. But as Claire and Sean were saying, there was a lot of conversations back and forth between these guys and the conservators about every little element on each work, and I have detailed photographs of every single piece and what damage has happened since the MCA acquired the work. So it is now treated as exactly as, you know, a painting, a photo, any other object that the MCA would collect. I think now they'll probably have a different storage solution, because the nature of the work has changed again, and it will no longer go through the post.
So we were in Roma, like we thought, it'll take a couple of weeks, but I think we had to extend our time there because it took longer. And then, you know, we went and had a conversation with the post office there and just said, look, we're bringing this, is this okay? And they just said, well, as long as it's within, you know, the dimensions of what is postable, that's fine. Yeah, and so they were, we were surprised. Some of the pieces did go missing. By the time we got in to San Francisco, there were a couple of pieces that just hadn't arrived, but then some of them ended up in Hong Kong and finally made it to the gallery. The whole project's called Pavillon, and I mean, that was part of the discussion too. We thought, it's going to be so much cheaper to do it by sea. We thought, no, we can't. We have to do it by air.
But you can see all that if you it's all upon the object, so you can see like the dates and
You can't see the other side, which will also contain, you know, a lot of the packaging and paraphernalia that's being put on it for the postal service.
Does anyone have questions about any of the other work? Because there's a substantial amount of work we haven't discussed, but I don't think we'll be able to go through every piece. So
I've got a question.
Sure.
the iconography on the kites, you know, kind of, I guess, partly traditional Japanese, partly comic, partly. Can you tell us a bit of like how you chose that and, or, you know?
Sure. Should we walk up there and get close to it?
So this is the body of work that we made last year. It's called You Are Here, and we're really interested in the connection between kite flying and air flight. So in a sense, like when you fly a kite, it's really, in an odd sense, it's actually quite a grounding thing to do, in that like you are in one spot and you have a piece of string, and then the kite is doing its thing and it's reacting to the environment around the environmental conditions. So it's really quite a, in a sense, it's quite a locating pursuit. But when you think of an airplane, it's quite the opposite. An airplane is something that makes you want to be somewhere else and to go somewhere else. But the history of kites and planes are shared in that sense. The early experimentation into powered air flight was really influenced by kite making, and we were interested in that idea of how ideas change and morph, and in a sense our use of Japanese kites is also part of that, in that a lot of the motifs used within Japanese kites actually come from either China or from India. So it's not, in a sense, a hermetic thing within itself. We made these works during lockdown, so it was a very kind
It's
of...
like our ISO project, in
Yeah.
a sense. It's
So
like
all
the
the...
ISO haircut. I mean, we're not painters, but we're supposed to go on this Japanese residency to work with in Niigata, to work with the people who make kites. They make these giant kites that are like architectural in their scale, and it requires a whole community to fly one of these massive kites. So hopefully we'll get to do that sometime in the future. But yeah, so we spent the time in our studio painting. All these components here are part from Australian Air Force surplus. So a lot of them are on helicopters and other aircraft bits and pieces.
Yeah, in a way, the surface that it's all made on is they're mostly helicopters that were used during the Vietnam War, Vietnam era helicopters. So in that sense, they are kind of interesting in that idea of the domino theory, and then how different cultures come together or clash or whatever. Mayday and our new work, Revolting Youth, kind of have similar themes. If you see on Revolting Youth, you can see it's quite indistinct. There's like a bit of orange text.
While we're here, we should actually just say thanks. Are any of the kids here?
They're probably gone up.
Well, during lockdown, we got a whole bunch of Blackheath kids on board to help us with some spray can. They got spray cans, and we had a bit of a party.
Yeah. So if later on you want, if you just take a shot of the QR code, you can see the video of the kids spray painting the wing. But if you kind of look closely, there's some orange text which is actually Latin, and I can't.
Are you going to read it?
Yeah, I'm not going to say the whole thing, but it kind of says Mimi, Numium, Neunium, Mimi, blah 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 blah. But it's basically a kind of old transcript joke that scribes who used to do Latin. It's kind of just a made up sentence, and the whole point is that it's impossible to read. So it's a kind of, and often graffiti is like that. It's some kind of message that's actually slightly opaque, or maybe people don't want to understand. So the idea is graffiti can be just like a tag, or it can be also like some kind of message behind it. And we were thinking about that in terms of Mayday. The word Mayday in itself has a couple of different meanings, in the sense that Mayday can be a cry for help, but it can also be a call to arms in a kind of on a environmental level, but also on a kind of labour rights level. So this, I guess, in a sense, when we were making Mayday, we were thinking about. You can almost imagine like that story of the soccer crew that were trapped on the Andes and the plane crash, and thinking about some kind of cry for help that could be seen from above. This was made just pretty much straight after the recent bushfires that we had, and we had a government that wasn't really listening to our concerns about why the whole world is on fire. And we were trying to think about, there's a whole generation of people that will have to deal with this, but their voice is not being heard. And is it because of the way that we made the text is using sticker bombing, which is a pretty...
Well, it's a similar vernacular in a sense to graffiti.
Yeah. So if you see it close up, you can see that it's made out of thousands of little stickers. You often see them on, telegraph poles or whatever, and it's like... So yeah, we're just thinking about how things are communicated, but then how things are not, how messages are not taken up in a sense.
But also thinking about the voice of youth. I think it's also evident in our video work over here called Pilgrims. It's all about selfie culture, wandering. It follows these young millennials that are wandering through this aeroplane graveyard. And, with these works here, we're thinking about, the message that these the youth might be trying to convey to society, but it's just not being heard.
But also the accelerated nature of the ruin. So, in the past, ruins have been something that take like architectural that take thousands of years or hundreds of years to happen. Or else, where now it's visiting industrial ruins is visiting things that have just taken decades to create, and this idea of again speeding up things and how have things sped up to such a point where the snake is eating its own tail kind of thing. So
You must have had to push through red tape to buy aircraft parts. Did they think that perhaps you could do it?
It was easier 10 years ago when we bought our first aeroplane. Yeah.
it's not that hard. We just did it online.
Well, the latest one we bought on Gumtree, and it was advertised as perfect man cave project. Yeah.
Have you done an environmental audit of the work?
No, well, we actually see our work, like we are part of this system, and
Sure.
we're also analysing the system, but the work itself is part of that system. And I guess it's really questioning it, but it's not like, I don't know, it could be another element that we, go down to consider, like how, it's a tricky thing, like when you're part of that system, yet you're critiquing it.
But I think there's also something intrinsic within the materiality of what we do, which goes back to that without being dogmatic or didactic.
Yeah, I kind of feel like with our work, there is an element of mystery. I feel like it's, not everything is revealed, and I find that is important for an audience to bring their own reading as well, without, absolutely everything being spelled out as well. But I know that might seem like a cop-out.
I think as contemporary artists, you guys are addressing those issues just by the nature of your work. There are plenty of artists who that isn't even part of their process. So you're talking about obsolescence, you're talking about, the way our systems just are wrapping around each other so fast, and at least bringing some consciousness to those elements.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of our work is about systems and how one system meets another system and just falls apart.
Yeah.
So, I think.
But I think it's a common thing, like within whenever you're researching or actively doing anything, like that has how they say the dirt that I move to uncover the truth, covers something else. And so it could be
In the act of doing it.
yeah, it can be, you can just go around in circles. So I guess you need to, within anything, you have to choose your battle, really. It's like having kids. You have to focus.
Choose your battles. Any final questions before we finish?
Your workspace is enormous. How on earth do you set that out in any kind of studio?
Well, we have been like, in the time that a lot of this work has been made, a lot of our projects are project-based. So it means like we go on artist residency and perhaps make it there. And then that will be left there and then shipped to, you know, where its destination. But in the process, like a lot of, we've been working in a garage, in a shipping container, in a yurt. Well, we have actually built our own studio in the last few years, and we did it all by YouTube. And we now have a big studio, which is, you know, not big enough. But the thing is, like,
when we made it to be big enough to fit a plane in.
yeah, because we've made this public work for Green Square down in Sydney, and we made the dimensions of it would actually house this aeroplane that's suspended in the library there. So yeah, it's a lovely. We're grateful to have this studio finally.
Thanks everyone for coming, and thanks Claire and Sean so much. It's always good to have the artists speak directly about their work, and just gives everyone more understanding of what they're seeing. And I know we've got the catalogue, and the website is listed in the catalogue. And don't forget the QR code on the Revolting Youth piece.
Yeah, thanks to the team here. It's been wonderful working with you guys. And
Thanks everyone for coming this morning.
Yeah,
It's so
thanks.
sunny outside in the
Thanks.
evening.